Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if my somber demeanor displease you, I cry your pardon, because we are here to do a little palaver on Hail to Stephen King, all about the Dark Tower movie 1 year later. The Dark Tower movie was released on August 4th, 2017, after various delays and various production problems. We saw various different directors attached at various points. We saw everyone from J.J. Abrams to Ron Howard, and inevitably we ended up getting the relatively unknown Nicolas Arcel that put this amalgamation, this bastardization, whatever long-time travelers on the path of the beam, constant readers, and various others alike were subjected to, and no doubt very, very disappointed by, myself included. Now, if you want to see my raw initial thoughts about this travesty of a film, you can see them when myself and Cecil Laird left the pre-screening for critics that happened days before the theatrical release to the public, and that is still here on Hail to Stephen King in the Stephen King themed section of playlist here on the horror show. And boy, I just got done watching this movie again, and I'm just even more sad and disappointed and heartbroken than I think that I initially was when I was walking out. We also did, Cecil and I had some beverages and had a full-on spoilers discussion, just ranting and raving. But this is a little bit more of a second look 1 year later, just kind of hoping it wasn't as bad as I remembered it. And it's as bad as I remembered it, if not worse, for the sheer fact that we had an amazing magnum opus of 8 books that were condensed down into a, if you don't include the closing credits, an 87-minute film. Now, I'm well aware that The Gunslinger, book 1 is a very short read indeed, but one of the biggest things that was made, and one of the biggest mistakes made, honestly, here, was the fact that they somehow got long-time, die-hard Tower junkies like myself on board for this film with the promise of one last time around. It was really the only way that I could find myself forgiving of a film that was just being very open about the fact that it was going to pick and choose different story aspects from the previous 8 books, and it was gonna just, mishmash them together, and yet still kind of be the beginning of a journey. But, if you haven't read all of the books, you're not gonna understand stuff here, and I'm not attempting to spoil massively, because the end of book 7 is what really makes that premise make sense and kind of justified it. King actually put out a photo of the Horn of Eld and the phrase "one last time around." Anyone who has read the books obviously knows what that is referring to, especially after finishing them. But I drank the Kool-Aid Jim Jones style, a guy that Steve King, El Rey, my favorite author, likes to mention quite a bit for whatever strange reason. But the man's story fascinates me in a similar sickening fashion. But so the Dark Tower movie cast Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey in the 2 leads of Walter O'Dim / Randall Flagg / the Man in Black, a man who goes by many names and aliases. And McConaughey in that casting, I was okay with. I was like, let's see how he brings some villainy to the proceedings. But I still stand by the miscasting of Idris in this role. And I'm sure that's it's a very controversial thing, I suppose, for me to even say something like that, based on the way Roland Deschain was represented in all of the art for this, always described as a John Wayne type, and so on and so forth. And then we go with a, very talented British African actor who has, won many accolades, and with tremendous reason, whether it's Luther. I even loved him in supporting roles like in Prometheus and things like that. And this is a tough one for me to muster any enthusiasm with, guys. I am not putting forth my normal zest, and that's because I'm trying to be a little bit more little bit more analytical and a little bit more just thought-provoking in this process. And I was so hopeful that with a second watch, I would be more forgiving of the shortcomings of this film, including the casting. I enjoyed Idris in the role and the performance that he brought, aside from the color of his skin, you know, but the writing and motivation of his character, pretty much the writing in this entire thing, the bastardization that I mentioned comes about because of the fact that with picking and choosing so many different aspects to try to Frankenstein together, they didn't really end up having much of a story that compelled the die-hard Tower junkies like myself. And yet it was so just vaguely skimming over things that it didn't develop the mythology enough, in my estimation, to really captivate newcomers either. It was just a bland and soulless film, and the only just glimmers that I saw were actually from Idris and also the young actor who played Jake Chambers, who I thought was cast fairly well and did do a pretty good job. That's the real core, in many ways, of a good chunk of the Dark Tower, is, you know, the true son relationship that Roland eventually, you know, just gains with Jake as the books go on, and just the whole arc of going from this cold and soulless person, which we do get some of initially, and we do see just kind of a, I guess, a microcosm of that relationship of going from indifference to inevitable, you know, love and care and compassion and all of that stuff. And we get that, but so much of it just, it's unable to resonate because of that short run time. And all of the stuff that we see borrowed from the later books with Breakers and with, you know, these themes that were explored in stuff like, you know, Black House and eventually books 6 and 7. Once again, just the taking of things and just making them not have any direct correlation. In fact, a lot more of the references that you know, you were hoping for, like the phrase "cause a wheel," even a mention of Eyebolt Canyon, you know, they're in deleted scenes that were taken away from this, and so you see some time spent in a town in this that, you know, it's not Magus, it's not you know, it's not Cambrian, it's not, you know, it's not Caliban Sturgis. It could be like a mishmash. It's once again a Frankenstein of all of these things together into making something that isn't directly from the book. And I know, you know, the whole every time around aspect and the whole, you know, different, the whole aspect of the multiverse is that there are different places that are at times very similar to one another, and then also those that are very different. I can commend the film for looking good in the time spent in Midworld. Everything filmed in South Africa, I really do think looks to me like it could be of Midworld. But, I mean, really the only positives that I can make mention of with this rewatch, this second look, as I call it, is the fact that I like the look of Midworld, and I enjoyed the chemistry between Idris and, you know, the young actor who played Chambers. But McConaughey is written terribly in this. He really is. He's almost comical at times, but not the same sort of comedy that we saw from the actor who played, like, Randall Flagg, for instance, in The Stand, the TV miniseries adaptation, who I thought brought that perfect balance of menace and snark, and just really, he didn't make it silly. And I feel like McConaughey was written in a very silly fashion in this. And if we're going to talk about reinterpretations of King in 2017, you can't help but mention It, in the fact that I didn't absolutely adore Stephen King's It. However, I definitely I enjoyed it quite a bit, because despite all of the changes that they made, I felt like they really retained the essence of the storytelling, despite the decade change, despite the altering and refashioning of some of the beats. But in this, there is so much that was drastically altered, from parental dynamics to, you know, even character motivations, you know, skimming over deep-rooted aspects of backstory that they still claim is going to be fleshed out at some point in this still in development Amazon TV series, which I predicted initially when we walked out of the Dark Tower press screening that I mentioned here earlier in this video was not going to happen. I'm not 100% sold on that now, because there has been this chatter from King especially about the fact that it would, in essence, be like a complete reboot. And that's really what this story should have been given from the first place. It should have been allowed to be like a Lord of the Rings or like a Harry Potter. It should have been either covering, you know, things book by book in individualized films, or it really should have been a TV series on an Amazon or an HBO or a Showtime, Netflix, Hulu, whatever. And you know, maybe in some alternate reality here in the multiverse of Sai King, you know, we can forge forward with a young Roland story, like has been discussed, which I have mentioned many times in all of these Hail videos that I've been doing for nearly 2 years now, that I do in fact enjoy the young Roland story possibly more than I do the new quartet. You know, the old quartet that we get stuff about in The Gunslinger, Wizard and Glass, and then, you know, a decent chunk of in the story within a story before we go into the story within the story within the story in The Wind Through the Keyhole. And you can see my demeanor immediately pop up when I start thinking about those books, when I start thinking about how beloved the source material is. I am not trying to be a bump on a log about this, and yet I didn't want to sit and skewer, like, you know, the angry reviewer, whatever person, you know, the shizzle talking stereotype person on YouTube. And that's because of the fact that I wanted to enjoy this movie, and even going back into this rewatch, I tried to find things that I enjoyed more about it, and I guess perhaps I was a little more forgiving of, you know, some of the action set pieces and the fact that they were shot fairly well, but I mean, it just skims over everything. It's at such a briskly edited pace in a lot of ways. Like, we have scenes in certain instances that are like a minute or so. You know, like for instance when Walter, you know, when McConaughey's flag is basically, he's confronting these two Tahin, because for this movie they decided to basically mush together the Kantoi and the Tahin. The Tahin are, you know, the crazy end world, you know, just, you know, minions of the Crimson King, essentially, that are like these like rat rodent type people. And then, you know, there's humans like Pimley, who we see very briefly in this film, who's a character in book 7 that I found very fascinating, being this human who had been recruited, you know, to work at you know, in Thunderclap, at this, you know, place where all of these just, you know, people with psychic abilities, not just kids like you see in this, you know, kids with the shine, not the touch or whatever. They had to change it to the shine for, you know, people to, you know, the noobs and the non-acclimated CRs to kind of understand a little bit more about what they're talking about here. But yeah, they decided to mishmash, you know, Kantoi and Tahin together, and the Kantoi in the books are basically the low men, the ones who wear the faces like we see in this film, and they appear human from a distance, but you can tell as you get closer that they are not. They're actually they're the offspring of humans and Tahin. That's what Kantoi are. And yeah, they decided to just scrap that idea, and once again, more streamlining. Everything about this film is streamlined and, you know, just dumbed down, and with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pages of rich mythology put down, and then even expanded upon in, you know, the fantastic Dark Tower comic books. It's just, it's so frustrating for me that I can't even get livid and pissed off about it. I was talking with a viewer of the show about this just last night, and, you know, I was saying that she had come across my my review of, you know, my raw review, and was like, oh, it was, you know, it made me sad seeing how sad you were. And that's the thing, I was just sad at the end of the day. I wasn't pissed, you know, I wasn't infuriated. I was just seriously just floored at my disappointment in this film, especially with just the years and years of anticipation and then rereading all of the books. If you want to see my reviews of all of the books, they are also here in the Hail to Stephen King archives. I did book by book by book by book, you know, all 8 volumes. I also talked about Little Sisters of Euloria, Little Sisters of Euloria. So I covered all the bases, y'all, and I I think that made me even more disappointed because I just built up the anticipation with that massive reread and stuff. And so, yeah, everything in this film is really, I hate to use a phrase like it, but this is a film that forgot the face of its father. And honestly, Sai King really upset me a little bit with his defense of this film, with his proclaiming of the quality of something like Spike TV's The Mist. I feel like 2017 was the biggest year ever for Sai King, whether it was, you know, the couple books that he put out, from, you know, Sleeping Beauties to Gwendy's Button Box, to the fact that half of the adaptations that came out that year were really good and the other half were pretty poor. And so I don't want to use a term like, you know, just, you know, saving face and, you know, just protecting his art. And you don't want to go out and badmouth something, but when the very poor critic scores, you know, the cinema score, the Rotten Tomatoes score, the audience scores, when all of these were correlating with people saying, I think the most amusing that I saw when I was doing some rereads of different reviews and stuff on Rotten Tomatoes is, go on, there are other Stephen King adaptations than these. And that perfectly sums it up. You know, last year you had amazing stuff like 1922, and you know, obviously it was very, very solid, and I'm very much looking forward to Chapter 2. I really wonder if this can be rebooted aside from that Amazon series. I mean, do they give it, you know, 5, you know, 7, 10 years or something like that? By that time, Sai King will be in his 80s, hopefully still with us, hopefully still writing. He has teased that there is another Dark Tower book idea that he has, and it would presumably finally, you know, map out stuff like Jericho Hill, which we only got glimpses of and, you know, was only fully realized in the comic books. But yeah, this film is, and this Blu-ray that I purchased has so much supplemental material, you know, from Last Time Around, which talks with, you know, the filmmakers and the author, pays tribute to the novels, and those deleted scenes that I mentioned. You know, there's actually some ones that we saw in promotional material, walking around in some beautiful locales of like tall brown grass and stuff that I don't even really think it's in the deleted scenes, and it was in a lot of the promo material. This was a film that went through reshoots and went through a lot of, you know, chopping and editing and presumed dumbing down after it screened poorly with test audiences. You know, what the hell do they know anyway? Was the test audience nothing but a bunch of diehard Tower junkies? Probably not. They were hoping this was going to be a massively appealing film. It did debut at #1 at the box office, but it was the second lowest opening #1 of any film in any weekend in 2017. It slid to #4 the following week, and I mean, in the previous week when it won at the beginning of August, it was knocking off Dunkirk that had been at #1 for 2 weeks already. So it's not like there was a hefty amount of competition for this to win the box office. And, you know, it made its production budget back. You know, it was produced for $60 million, made a little over, it was like 113, and it's worldwide. So, you know, probably made, it probably just barely broke even after, you know, advertising and promotional costs and things like that. But for $60 million, that's another thing, that this film does not have that epic feel to it for me. A lot of the sets, aside from the stuff in South Africa, especially like going into the Dixie Pig and, you know, Algo Ciento and stuff, I mean, where all the breakers are, it did not feel like a villain hideout. It felt like a small set, and it just didn't, I mean, especially with the way, you know, just the base at Thunderclap and everything is described, and, you know, just how sprawling everything is. And I don't like this movie. This movie hurts my heart. It genuinely, genuinely does. And I feel bad for making such a bummer video for you guys, because you know that I love just bringing my love and my passion about Stephen King. And this is the funniest thing, is that in all of the films that forgot the face of their father coverage that I've done, which I started a few months ago, whether it was doing a Return to Salem's Lot, whether it was doing, you know, the 2 sequels to Sometimes They Come Back, whether it was The Rage Carry 2, all of these different films, while some of them stupid, I could really enjoy. Even it was almost in some cases like they were so bad they were good. I would definitely say that about, you know, Sometimes They Come Back Again. I would definitely say that for The Rage Carry 2, which is very much of and Return to Salem side. I actually had fun with those movies, but there is very little, if any, fun to be had in this film. And when you're just grasping at straws, trying so hard to find redeeming qualities in this movie, I think this is the lowest point so far in that series of coverage for, you know, films that forgot the face of their father. And so a lot of the humor falls short. There's just so much in this movie that just disappointed me immensely. And yeah, this is going to be a shorter episode. It was originally supposed to be some anniversary coverage to, excuse me, not anniversary coverage, a deep dive look at all the iterations of The Mist. And I knew that the anniversary of this film was in August, and I had planned on doing a second look and just trying to get a different impression of things. And unfortunately, it was just a phrase that I like to utter all too often. It was like beating a red-headed dead horse. In rewatching this film, having it hurt my heart so significantly, and I just have like I have a bitter taste in my mouth now, and I'm genuinely oh man, I'm hurting right now, y'all. I truly am. I'm curious though about all of your thoughts on the Dark Tower movie. Am I being too harsh on it? Am I just so enraptured in the mythology that King, you know, put to page previously that I couldn't just enjoy this for what it was and for what it hoped to be? There is even talk just, you know, in the last year of the fact that Arcel, the director, still wants to make the sequel, which will draw heavily from the drawing of the three, and will have Susanna and Eddie in it, and Lobstrosities, and, you know, he was talking with Collider about that, but I just don't foresee it happening. And in a lot of ways, I don't want it to happen. I don't want more from this iteration. You know, if we can reboot like a Spider-Man 3 times, or have 3 different Spider-Men, you know, in the span of like a decade or so, then I think you can definitely recast, do this properly. I do feel like it has a better home for this dense source material on either a streaming service or a pay cable network. I feel like that would be better than doing a series of 2.5 hour, you know, close to 3 hour films, because, you know, Wizard and Glass would either have to be broken up into 2 halves. Probably the same with Wolves and with Dark Tower 7. But yeah, I think a streaming service, which with Castle Rock, with 11/22/63, things like that have shown that the long form for King works so much better as far as an adaptation goes. And, you know, maybe before Sai King, you know, enters the clearing at the end of the path, which is something I don't even want to think about. I hope he's got another 10, 15, you know, 20 years if God wills. And yes, that would be a major blessing if we get that. I hope we get that other Dark Tower story. And I hope that we do someday get a new interpretation of the Dark Tower that is as faithful as it should have been to begin with. And yeah, presumably this is the last time that you will be seeing me sporting this beautiful shirt until maybe some more of the Dark Tower comics coverage that Cecil and I have been discussing, or if I do finally get to sit down and do a drunken laughantary, as I will call it, all about this film. I have a very special guest in mind for that, and I'm very much looking forward to it. But yeah, I'm gonna finish reading the series before that can transpire. So thank you very much for this palaver. Thank you, gracias. I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. If you have not subscribed here to The Horror Show, we do 2 different episodes, sometimes 3, every single day. I do Hail to Stephen King here twice a week on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Terrifying Tuesdays, Scarific Saturdays. And I will bring my zest, my vigor back for this next video, but I couldn't muster any after watching this. I hate to give a Venom trailer quote, but, you know, like a turd floating in the wind or whatever the hell he said in that crazy crap. Yeah, but if you haven't subscribed to The Horror Show, please do so. Ring that bell so you get notifications about any time there's a new Hail episode. Also, if you have any interest in further palaver with myself and various other Tower junkies and constant viewers and readers alike, I have my Facebook closed group called Hail to Stephen King. We have over 150 members, just like 40 something new ones in just the last week. All kinds of different people from all across the world, giving everything from you know, international covers from King books, personal experiences, favorite quotes, information about what they're reading right now. Every Tuesday we do something called #TowerTuesday, where we share different pictures and you know, just thoughts and quotes and recollections and fond memories of the Dark Tower series. So that's something that always is a ton of fun for me, and it is a great growing community there that if you have any inclination to go beyond just the comments section here below, which I do obviously appreciate as well, send me one of those little request things. I am the sole admin on that particular group, and I'm down to have everybody come and join for some meaningful palaver, because this was not of the meaningful variety. So until the wheel of Ka comes around once more, I must say hasta luego, sin amigos, as in cinema amigos, sin amigos. I hope that we have been well met. I hope that we get to see one another sooner rather than later, and until that instance occurs, remember, stay scared and read Stephen King's The Dark Tower, because this is trash. I know, I had the rage.